Okay, part 9. I want to get this done. Why it failed and how to fix it. As Benno carried me to the factory making the shampoo, he looked at me somewhat awkwardly, as if he had something to say but didn't really want to say it. Hey, mine, about that hair cleaning liquid. Yes, what about this simple all-in-one shampoo? It's long and hard to say. Can't you call it something else? It was true that the name I thought up would feel long and hard to understand to Benno and others from this world since they didn't understand the words I was actually saying, which meant that the nobles might not really take to the product after it entered the market. Well, I kinda just made it up on the spot. So it's not an important name or anything, you can change it. Really? Benno blinked in surprise. I nodded at him with a smile. It all started because I felt great after finally cleaning my itchy, dry hair, and just said the first thing that came to mind. I wasn't attached to it. Feel free to call it whatever you like. You know, that doesn't make it very easy for me. Benno furrowed his brows deeply in thought. It took a lot of marketing sense to give a new product a name. Wanting to help as much as I can, I rattled off the advice that came to mind. We're talking about a product name here, so I think it should be easy to say and easy to remember. Maybe instead of calling it something like hair cleanser, we should use a word that make people think about looking pretty and feeling good. Benno's expression hardened the more I spoke. It was possible that my advice had just increased the pressure on him. I've been calling it a simple all-in-one shampoo this whole time too, so I don't know if I think it's fine. Let's shrugged casually as Benno fell so deep in thought that there were heavy creases on his forehead. Mine, do you have any ideas? Any at all? Benno looked at me for help, having seemingly failed to think of a good name on his own. But I had grown so used to calling it simple all-in-one shampoo that I couldn't really think of another name for it. I could just shorten it, but I didn't know if the people of this world would really understand what the name meant. I don't know, how about rinse shampoo? It always has to have shampoo, huh? Not really, that's just what comes to mind for me, so... Benno murmured to himself for a bit, but because he was both unable to think of a better name himself and used to my original name for it, he settled on shortening it to Rinsham. Is that really good enough? When we reached the central plaza, Benno headed straight for the western road. I blinked in surprise, having expected the oil squeezing workshop to be along the Craftsman's Alley. There are workshops on the west side of town, too? I thought they were all in the Craftsman's Alley. It used to be a food processing shop. You generally find those in the west since they want to be near the market where people move the most products. Right, minerals are food. I've only been using them to make Rinsham for so long I almost forgot. When I first made shampoo, I was just obsessed with getting my hair clean and stopping it from itching. It never even crossed my mind that it would end up being turned into a product to sell. At first I was at a loss since I didn't have rice, seaweed, or any kind of juice. I dug through my memories to think of everything about shampoo I could remember, and in the process remembered reading a Natural Living magazine that described mixing fruit oil with powdered salt and orange peels to make a scrub. My old mom and I made it together when she got obsessed with natural living. Incidentally, that magazine also described firmly mixing egg whites to make face spreads or using dried plums and sake to make skin lotion, but none of that stuff had anything to do with me and my young, fresh skin. All that concerned me was the ingredients to make shampoo. It sure was hard to get oil that first time. To be honest, I had been so stressed out from my itchy head and I didn't think about how difficult the journey to the forest was, so I didn't realize it at the time, but I had been kind of unfair to Thule by making her get the ingredients for me. Thanks to her efforts, I got my head clean, it made my hair silky smooth again, and took my first step toward a healthy lifestyle. Thank you, Thule. The workshop Benno led us to looked like a large warehouse. As one would expect from a food processing plant, there was a mixture of a wide variety of different smells drifting through the air. There were several work tables lined up next to each other where workers were busy working away at different jobs. Along the walls were shelves of tools ready for use. Is the foreman here? Tell him Benno wants to see him. Said Benno to a nearby worker who replied with an enthusiastic understood before rushing off. Benno set me down and waited for the foreman to arrive. Soon enough, the worker spoke to a somewhat overweight man, who then walked in our direction with his belly shaking. You could tell at a glance that he was the boss of a shop that dealt with edibles. His body made it clear that he loved eating from the bottom of his heart. I had called him somewhat overweight, but that was from the perspective of a Japanese person. Considering how scarce food was in the city, he could probably be considered fairly fat. Hello, Benno. Thank you for coming all this way. I see you've brought 2 kids with you. They're the ones who made the Rinsham in the first place. Keep that a secret, said Benno with a forceful enough glare that the foreman bobbed his head in silent agreement. So, did you figure the problem out? I'm afraid not. We've tried changing our tools, workers, and all sorts of things, but it feels like we're just getting further away from making the right product. Benno's expression darkened with frustration at the negative report, and the way he glared at the anxious foreman honestly made me feel like I was getting the same stink eye. I pulled on the foreman's sleeve and spoke to him. Could you show me how you're making it? Sure, I'd appreciate you telling me if you noticed something. I'm getting reports that the stuff we make here doesn't make hair that much cleaner. We moved to a corner of the room so the foreman could do a live demonstration. It'd be a waste of materials if he failed, so he crushed just one marrow using weights to squash the fruits all at once. He then held up the cloth and wrung it so the oil would drip into the bowl below. It took way less time than I was used to since both Thule and Lutz had to use a hammer. And that's how we get the oil. Same so far, right? The oil extraction process seemed fine to me. I could hear Lutz muttering that it looked the same to him, and at a glance I couldn't see a problem either. We have to use hammers to crush the fruits instead of weights, but I don't think a difference that minor would impact anything that significantly. Yeah, kids would have to use a hammer for this. Guess I should try that next, murmured the foreman. Before we did that, I had a request. Do you mind if I see the oil you just squeezed out? The foreman nodded and handed over the bowl. Inside I saw a perfectly clear green oil with no impurities floating around. It was oil completely different from the thick white oil we dealt with. Oh, okay, I understand now. I figured out the problem as soon as I saw the oil. That was a good thing, and I was happy to have the solution, but at the same time they were failing for a reason that kind of made me sad. So sad. What are we doing wrong? The foreman practically pounded for the answer, and I gave it to him with somewhat slumped shoulders. It's the cloth you're using to wring out the oil, I said. Benno immediately glared at the foreman, who opened his eyes wide and desperately shook his hands. The cloth? But I bought pretty good ones just for this new job. That's the problem. Now both Benno and the foreman were looking at me with wide eyes. I shrugged and placed the oil-filled bowl on the table. The pieces of cloth that our families have are rough and loose. Threadbare. I think you can tell by our clothes, but we're poor. We don't use cloth this finely woven, so when we squeeze out the oil, little bits of the broken fruit and tiny seed-like things get stuck in the oil. The oil that Thule and Lutz squeezed out was always thick white, not pure green. The reason was simple. The cloth we used was so much more threadbare than the ones in this workshop. And on top of that, we squeezed the fruit completely dry since we couldn't afford to waste any of the oil, even though that ended up making the oil less pure. The stuff that makes the oil thick is called scrub. It's important for getting hair clean. The pure oil made in workshops like this would normally have powdery salt, dried citrus peels, and nuts added to it in order to make a scrub. But in our case, the oil was already a scrub right after being squeezed out, not to mention that we didn't have the leeway to add anything to the oil in the first place. We were pushing it just by adding herbs for the smell. The foreman's mouth was hanging open in stunned surprise. He hadn't expected that answer, neither had I, really. To think that the more he struggled to get better quality oil, the more distant from his goal he went. I could only imagine the stress he had been feeling. On the other hand, Benno's expression had significantly softened, likely out of relief over having found the source of the problem. He picked up the cloth with the tips of his fingers and shrugged. Didn't think the cloth would be the problem here. Not sure if I've ever been punished for buying high-quality tools before. I was thinking the problem would have something to do with mixing the herbs. The herbs are mainly just there for the smell. The foreman let out a heavy sigh, looking both relieved and troubled. I guess we've got to throw out all the oil we got using these cloths then. What? No way, that'd be a huge waste. It's still usable. Given the choice, I would have liked to use high-quality oil free of impurities myself. Putting in ingredients to make a proper scrub would result in Rinsham a lot better than what I usually make. You just have to put fruit stuff into this pure oil. With the right selection of ingredients, you'd have Rinsham a lot better than what I made myself. Yeah? You sure know a lot for a little girl, don't you? Muttered the foreman, impressed. At the same time, Benno's eyes gleamed like a predator who had found his prey. Oh no, I shouldn't have said that. I looked at Lutz, the blood draining from my face, and saw him shaking his head in exasperation. At this rate, Benno was going to find me out the same way Lutz found me out. I'm so dumb, don't I ever learn? You know you don't. I somehow managed to keep my mouth from trembling while forcing a fake smile on my face. Stay calm, he hasn't found me out yet. Just be careful about using stuff with rough grains, since that can hurt the scalp, I said with a smile, and then tried to leave the workshop, but Benno gripped my shoulder and held me in place with a ferocious smile of his own. Mine, it sounds like you know a lot more than you've been letting on, huh? I did, but I wasn't about to dig my hole any deeper. It would be impossible to leave a peaceful life here if I drew suspicion to myself like this. I needed to escape Benno's interrogation, though, through any means possible. Unlike Lutz, Benno didn't know mine from the past, and thus had no concrete evidence to fuel his suspicions. I could get through this if I tried hard enough, and try hard I would. Digging my heels into the ground to defy the force that was Benno, I did my best to smile and bluff my way out of the situation, despite the cold sweat running down my back. Anything more will cost you. I charge an information fee for my services. I don't talk for free. How much? Benno jutted his chin up with a grin and told me to name a price, but no matter how much he paid me, I wasn't planning on telling him anything. However, negotiations would end the second I said that. It was important that I make Benno choose to withdraw from negotiations himself. My head spun as I desperately thought of something to say, my heart pounding in my chest. The Rinsham's already going to do well on the market, so as is, just how much would you be willing to pay just to earn a little more on top of that, really? I said, maintaining my cool as we glared at each other behind fake smiles. She's already like a merchant, whether she admits it or not. Benno's, whether she has shown it, in some ways she is, in some ways she's not. Benno's dark red eyes were gleaming with a ferocious light, and I wanted to just give in immediately out of fear, but this was one battle I couldn't afford to lose. Anything I said about this would be viewed with clear suspicion and draw unwanted attention. Benno spoke to the foreman without taking his glaring eyes off mine. Mind if we borrow your conference room? Not at all, go ahead. The moment the foreman answered, Benno hefted me up and abducted me into the conference room. Mine? We're just having a little chat, nobody follow us, shouted Benno, making Lutz pause in his tracks with a jerk. The foreman nodded, pale. Having seized control of someone else's conference room, Benno set me down in a chair and then sat on the one opposite to me. He glared at me in silence for a bit, then spoke. 2 small golds. What? I had just misheard him. It slipped past my ears. I thought I heard a pretty absurd price for the information, but it was all just my imagination. I ended up stunned, but by pretending I had simply misheard him, I managed to get back on my feet, but the moment I did, Benno repeated himself more clearly this time. I'll pay 2 small golds. Tell me how to improve the Rinsham, what fruit to use, everything you know. He would be willing to pay 2 small golds just to improve the Rinsham? How much profit was he expecting to earn off of it? A lot! Girl, you know how much shampoo, scrubs, anything like that sold in your world. Imagine how it would be in this world where hygiene is not very good. He would make a killing off of it. 2 small golds is nothing in comparison to that. Maybe he was planning on overcharging nobles like he overcharged Frida. Mr. Benno, how much are you planning to charge for each unit of Rinsham? I questioned, making Benno narrow his eyes a little and snort. That's got nothing to do with you. In that case, I've already told you how to make the Rinsham, so improving it has nothing to do with me either. I let out a sigh of relief on the inside, and thinking this would be the end of the conversation, put my hands on the table to climb off the seat. 3 small golds. Don't expect me to go higher. Benno grabbed onto my hands and, looking a little frustrated, raised his price. My heart wavered at that massive sum, but if that was his maximum price, then the negotiations were already over. For the sake of a peaceful life, I had to get Benno off my trail. I declined. Take the money and save it. The only thing that can fix your devouring is money. I started to say I decline, but Benno interrupted me with a glare. He spoke in a low, forceful voice that made it sound like he was on the verge of grinding his teeth. Mr. Benno, you knew about my devouring? I considered the possibility, but didn't know for sure until the geezer told me the other day. The geezer being the guildmaster. What had he told Benno, I wondered, and what connection did it have with how Benno lowering his guard around him after I sold the hairpins to Frida? Frida more than likely told her grandfather about it. In turn, he told Benno. Why would he not tell Benno? They both want you to work in their stores. Of course they're going to want to do something to make sure that you survive. Benno's change of tone threw me off enough that I lost my strength in the process of standing up, and fell back onto my chair with a plop. That must have looked like me adjusting back into my seat, so Benno leaned further over the table to bring his face closer to mine. He He then spoke in a low voice such that only I could possibly hear him. Despite being faint whispers, I could clearly hear everything he said. His granddaughter has the devouring, just like you. But she's alive thanks to money, and the Guildmaster's connection to nobles. You need to sell the information you have, save money, and prepare for the day that's coming, whether you like it or not. What day? The day you lose control of the heat inside your body. Understanding washed throughout my body. I had felt the devouring heat within me growing over time, bit by bit, but had passed it off as my imagination, a variation based on my health. It seemed that Benno and the Guildmaster had come to the conclusion that the devouring heat within me was indeed growing over time, and eventually it would become too much for me to control. When I placed social isolation and being dead on two sides of the scale, the answer here became painfully clear. I don't want to die yet. I had finally gotten to the point where I could make paper. Over the winter, I had failed repeatedly, but after a lot of work, I created an environment where making books was no longer just a dream. Not to mention that I got more used to life in this world as the seasons passed, which meant less clashing with my family. In the past, I was always dead weight, but at last I had found somewhere where I could be at least a little useful. Living in this world was finally getting to be fun. I didn't want to die yet, but I had to consider what would happen if I gave Benno the information he wanted, and he got creeped out. What would happen if he considered me a creepy weird little girl? Unlike Lutz, who knew mine from the past, Benno had no context. He would just consider me a creepy kid who knew way too much about things she shouldn't. No, he wouldn't try to kill her. Though I'm sure he would consider her information to be useful. But be more curious, obviously. He probably wouldn't attempt to kill me just for being creepy, and since he didn't have a history with my family like Lutz, nothing too bad would happen if he informed them that I was being creepy. The worst case scenario was just Benno distancing himself from us and canceling his plans to hire us as his apprentices. However, if that happened, I could just accept Frida and the Guildmaster's offer. I wouldn't be completely out of options if Benno withdrew his support. If money's what it takes to survive, well, I want to keep living. Okay. I'll sell it for 3 small goals, I said, looking at Benno in the eyes. He gave a small nod and released my hands. Then, after we touched cards, he picked up my bag and took the supply order set without even asking me first. Hey, that's my stuff. Stuff my store supplied you. That's true, but at least ask me first. Yeah, sorry, said Benno without sounding sorry at all. He took the pen and ink and readied them, treating the supply order board like a memo pad. All right, let's hear it. Start with how we can sell the oil we thought wasn't working. You just have to put ingredients into it to make it to a scrub. There's a lot of different things that would work here, but the easiest would be salt. Crush the salt until it's a powder, add it to the oil, and it should work for both cleansing and for deodorizing. Salt? Really? Out of everything I had read about in the magazine, mixing fruit oil with powdered salt was the easiest thing to make. Benno's eyes were wide with surprise, probably not having expected something so familiar to him to be effective here. You could also dry the peel of a citrus fruit, by which I mean dry the peel of something like a felsiet, whatever that is, and crush it into a powder too. It should smell better and clean more than the oil by itself. That kind of peel, huh? Got it. Anything else? Benno looked at me while scratching away. Maybe nuts? Mixing in some nuts fruit powder should work too. Nuts fruit, whatever. I've never had the opportunity to try any of this myself since my family's too poor. How do you even know it then? Hello? Oh, here we go. Benno's dark red eyes were locked on me. You shouldn't have said that, girl. His expression making it clear he was intent on squeezing out as much information as possible from me. You know about things you couldn't try yourself. Mine. Just who are you? That's a secret and not one you'll be buying with small golds either. Benno's mouth bent into a bitter frown. My heart pounded as he looked at me with the suspicious eyes of someone looking at a person that they just couldn't understand. Either he's going to have to buy your information, or he could ask Lutz about that. I wasn't strong enough to bear being looked at like that without losing my cool a little. With my fake smile still plastered on my face, I decided to roll the dice and risk asking Benno where I stood with him. Are you going to cut off ties with me because I'm a creepy little girl? I sold you this information prepared for that to happen. Benno's eyes widened with surprise for a second, then he lowered his eyes and scratched his head before letting out a heavy sigh. Then he slowly shook his head multiple times and looked up. When he did, he was wearing his usual confident grin. Nah, you're gonna make me a lot of money. My only concern here is making sure nobody else steals you away. Don't forget, I'm a merchant. He said, standing up and ruffling my hair. By treating me normally, he was signaling that he had decided to maintain the status quo and not dig any deeper. I let out a relieved sigh. Ducked to avoid Benno's hand since he wouldn't stop rustling my hair, and stuck my tongue at him. Girl, you bear... Oh, boy. But, the funny thing is, if he found out who she really was, and what world she came in, and what kind of technology and stuff they had in that world, he would really be looking for information from her. How to make all that kind of stuff to make a profit in his world. Some of that stuff would be game-changing for people. So yeah. He would definitely not attempt to kill you. No, you'd be the goose that laid the golden eggs, essentially. That's what you would be to him. Heck, you're kind of already that now, but even more so once he realizes the truth. If he realizes the truth. A Tromba appears. The season had become such that waking up and getting out of bed in the morning was quite the challenge. What time are they? 2:46. 78 more pages. As I lazily stayed in bed thinking about how cold it was, my dad finished getting ready for work. Mine, how are you feeling? Same as always. Why do you ask, Dad? Maybe he misinterpreted me as staying in bed as me feeling sick. I lazily sat up, and Dad looked at me with concern. Otto wants to have a winter meeting with you and ask if you can come today. Okay, I can go. I'm not sick right now, and I don't have any business with Benno. Dad left to get to the gate before it opened at second bell. After seeing him off, I got out of bed to change quickly. Mom, Thule, I'm going to the gate today. Got it. There won't be much to gather in the forest soon, so I think you should be fine not going there anymore this year. Thule is right. We don't want you catching any unnecessary fevers around this time of year. Mind, you should stop going to the forest for now. As the temperature dropped and catching colds became more normal, it became increasingly common for me to have days where I just didn't feel good. Pushing myself just led to those around me having to take care of me, so I decided it was best if I indeed stopped going to the forest. Hey, mind going to the gate today? Said Lutz after seeing me leave my building with just my tote bag. I was bundled up in clothes to not catch a cold, but in contrast, the other kids were all wearing relatively light clothing. Bundling up made it harder to move freely. Excuse me. And it was important to gather as much firewood as possible in this brief period of winter, right before the snows came. I walked to the gate along with the other kids. As of late, I could more or less keep up with them, ending up only a little behind, though almost every time I decided to try and catch up, Lutz would stop me. Alright, I'll be passing by the gate on my way back, so be sure to wait for me. Good luck with your gathering, Lutz. Everyone else was going to the forest, so we split at the gate. I didn't see my dad at the gate, but the guards recognized me by now. I saluted at one of them, and they took me to the usual night watch's room. Mr. Otto, are you here? It's me, mine. I opened the door and saw that the shelves along the walls were already filled with budget-related boards. Otto was surrounded by the boards, sorting through them. Hey, Amon, good to see you here. It's been a while, Mr. Otto. I gave him a sharp salute and moved to the chair closest to the furnace. After basically climbing up the decently sized chair, I took out my slate and pen from my bag. So let's talk about our winter plans. How often do you think you'll be able to drop by? I talked to my dad about it, and he decided that I can come when I'm feeling good, it's not snowing, and he's on morning or noon shift. First of all, it wasn't common for me to feel good during the winter. I was stronger than last year and could pray that I wouldn't be bedridden with colds as much, but it was impossible to predict. Second of all, there was the weather. There were constant blizzards during the winter. Dad said it didn't have to be completely sunny, and I could go when there was just light snow, but I knew he would go back on that the second he saw a snowflake. He was just too overprotective. And finally, Dad worked the night shift on a third of his weekdays during the winter. I think I'll be able to count on both hands the total number of times I can visit the gate during the winter. Well, that's about what I'd expected. I was just hoping for more, since even that one time you helped last winter made a big difference. I hope you drop by as often as possible. Doing some math was all it took to earn some slate pens, so I didn't mind. I would need more slate pens this year than the last, since Lutz and I will be studying together, so my plan was to work hard and earn a lot of them. Oh, and by the way, the pens I use here don't count as part of my pay. Laughed Otto, thinking like a merchant now, I see. Don't worry, the slate pens he used during work don't count. Relax and write out all the math you want. He may have found that funny, but regardless, it meant a lot to me. I rolled up my sleeves so they wouldn't erase the letters and readied my slate pen. Here's your work for today. Otto placed a stack of boards in front of me. They were expense ledgers for the supplies used by the department of higher-ups who managed the guards. It seemed that Otto was in charge of the budgets for the entire department. He told me with slumped shoulders that it was easier to do all the work himself rather than run the risk of pointing at the mistake of his superiors. Being careful not to make any mistakes myself, I got to work summing the numbers up while double-checking the calculations. You there, Otto? Take your place at the gate immediately. A soldier burst into the room looking rushed. Otto drew a sharp line on the board to save his place, and after telling me not to let anyone touch the calculator, ran out of the room. There seemed to be a commotion throughout the entire gate. I could hear a ton of footsteps rushing by on the other side of the door, sounding louder than usual. Footsteps due to the stone floors reverberating. Everyone was so rushed that I really couldn't just open the door and ask someone what had happened. I had visited the gate many times before to help Otto, but never had things gotten this intense. Uneasiness crept into my heart, which wasn't helped by the fact that I was all alone in the room. I'm going to be okay in here, right? I breathed deeply, and as I looked around the empty room, I felt a faint dizziness. Not about to let even the slightest failing of my spirits pass by unnoticed, the heat within me went on a rampage. The heat trying to burst out from within me felt like it was pointing out my weakness. Frustrated, I tensed up my body to force the heat back down. I imagined putting a lid on the fire and sealing it within me. So tired. Fighting back the devouring took so much out of me that my anxiety faded a little. I continued doing math, and Otto soon returned. He finished the board he was working on and started packing up his share of the paperwork. Seems like a Tromba showed up. A kid came running for help, so half the guards here went off to the forest. I have to stand at the gate until they come back, but could you keep working here while I'm gone? Also, I'll send anyone with letters of introduction your way. I trust you to take care of them. Knowing what had happened calmed me down enough that I could do my work without worrying so much. Speaking of which, Lutz had mentioned earlier that Trombas generally started showing up in the forest after late autumn. Maybe we could get more Tromba wood to turn into paper. But if it's matured enough that soldiers have to join the fight, maybe the wood would be too hard for paper. Who knows? The last time a Tromba showed up, it only took some kids to cut it down, so I didn't feel nervous at all. I just got back to work lining up letters and doing math. Eventually, I heard a noise outside the door again. Mine, it's Lutz. He said he has something he wants to talk to you about. If you got some Tromba wood, I need to go home and talk to him about it. I finished the math from here to here. Thanks, you're a big help. The kids and soldiers must have returned together, so I could see them hanging around the gate with Tromba wood in hand. I looked around for Lutz and saw Dad rushing my way with a large log on his shoulder. Mine, look, your dad cut out a Tromba this big. Wow, that's pretty big. Are we going to use that for firewood? No, Tromba wood doesn't burn well, so it's not good for firewood. They're going to carve it into furniture. That furniture will survive a house fire, so wood like this is pretty valuable. Wow, I see. Interesting. I should expect nothing less from a weird fantasy plant. It could hardly be called wood if it doesn't even burn in a fire. As I shook my head in both exasperation and admiration, I saw Lutz gesturing at me from behind Dad. Yes, Lutz? What, you only got tiny branches like that, Lutz? Take a look, Mine. Your dad's a lot cooler. Dad puffed out his chest with victorious pride after seeing the Tromba branches in Lutz's basket, but I'd really rather him not try to compete with a little kid. And unfortunately for him, Lutz had exactly the kind of thin young branches I wanted. I let it aside, but in reality, since Trombas get harder to cut the larger they get, those who had managed to chop off large logs were considered heroes by the kids and soldiers. I could see people comparing the wood and competing to see who had thicker wood and larger branches. Those branches suck. One of the kids, bullied over his small branches, threw his Tromba wood on the ground in a tantrum. Tromba wood didn't make for good firewood, and the young soft branches weren't strong enough to be made into furniture. It was considered useless to just about everyone, but for me it was necessary to make high-quality paper. I wasn't about to miss a chance to get some for free. If you don't want it, can I have it? Do you really not want it? Of course not, it sucks. Embarrassed by all the attention that he was drawing, the boy left it at that and ran off. I picked up the abandoned Tromba wood, and other kids started taking their own wood out of their baskets. You can have mine too. Bringing it home with me won't do much good. You may have mine as well. I don't need it. A fairly large amount of wood ended up piled around me. Wow, looks like we got a lot of it now. Yep. Let's gathered up all the dropped Tromba wood with me and packed it all in his basket. Dad, stunned by what he had seen, furrowed his brows and looked at our baskets. Mine? What do you want that stuff for? The wood I use needs to be soft and young. Let's go, Lutz. I turned my back to Dad and started walking off. Lutz followed, scratching his head. I brought back some of the trauma because I know we need it, but, we gotta use cut wood within, 5 to 7 days, right? How's that gonna work? I don't want to get in the river when it's this cold, and we can't waste the firewood we need to boil water for a whole bell. Should we just give it up? I knew that there wasn't much firewood lying around the forest in this time of the year, but I knew for sure that Benno would be furious if we wasted trauma wood just because of that. I know what he's going to say already, but let's talk to Benno about it first. He'd definitely get mad if we just threw it all away. I'm not going to go into the river when it's this cold. We headed to Benno's store, but the guard naturally said Lutz couldn't go inside looking like he did. He would have to wait outside. The guard called Mark, who followed him back to the door. They went inside with me. We entered the store just as the customer left Benno's room. The customer glared at me in my poor person outfit and let out an audible, I really should buy a change of clothes soon. I don't want people to sour toward the clothes Benno sells due to me, which means I need to save up my money first. Benno blinked in surprise after seeing me walk into his room. What are you doing here? We didn't have a meeting planned. This is an unplanned meeting, but I have something I need to talk to you about. Turns out a tromba showed up in the forest today, I said, and immediately Benno stood up with a clatter and leaned forward. A tromba? Did you get any wood from it? Yes, we ended up with a lot of wood, but the thing is, it'll be hard to turn it into paper. Oh, why is that? Benno narrowed his eyes in suspicion, not understanding how it could be hard. Despite knowing it would make him mad, I explained my reasoning. Well, we don't have enough firewood to boil water for a whole bell, and the river— You idiot! Before I could finish explaining that the river would be too cold to enter, the impatient Benno dropped his lightning on me. Think about how much cheaper firewood is than rare tromba wood. Don't even try to tell me you can't even understand the concept of investing in materials for more profit later. I thought you would say that. Can't we go to the lumber yard with Mr. Mark to buy firewood? I looked so young that even if I went to the lumber yard asking for wood, I would look suspicious and get turned away. Where's Lutz? He's outside. We came here right after he got back from the forest, so he's a little too messy to come inside. I said immediately after which Benno rang the bell on his table to summon Mark. Mark, ask Lutz if mine's doing well enough to go to the lumber yard today. Mine, you write the supply order here. Benno took out a board and ink for me, so I started writing the supply order. Mr. Benno, I just need enough wood to boil water for an hour. What should I write? Just write that. They'll sell you a little more than you need, and that's ideal. I nodded and kept writing, at which point Mark returned from talking to Lutz. It seems that mine would do well to not walk any further today. If she had finished writing the supply order, I could go to the lumber yard with Lutz. Thank you, Mark. After giving Mark the supply order and seeing him off, Benno handed me several boards. Read these if you're bored. Gladly. The boards are basically advice for merchants and discussed a lot of key points about contracts. Pleased at the opportunity, I pored over them while humming, and eventually I realized something weird. Mr. Benno, does the wood Mark's buying count as part of your initial investment in us? Benno turned to silently look at me, but didn't say anything. Also, I thought it was kind of weird, but why did you say that you were done investing in us after we had finished our prototypes? Didn't the magic contract you signed say you would pay for everything until our baptism? Shouldn't the expensive Suketa count as part of that? I thought about why Benno would have me read boards about the contracts, and the only thing that came to mind was the details of our magic contract. Finally noticed, huh? What? Why'd you trick us? I didn't trick you. I tested you to see if you remembered what the contract we signed said. Let's just say I was curious to see how you'd react if I broke the contract. You didn't say anything, so I figured you forgot what it said. He snorted and glared at me while drumming his fingers on the table. For a single moment, I was at a loss for words, but then I managed to return his glare. I just thought it made sense for you to stop paying us after we finished the prototypes. I never expected that you were tricking us, and since magic contracts burn up after being signed, I couldn't double-check. Benno snorted again and shrugged with a smug grin. It's exactly because the contracts burn up that you have to write it down somewhere else, or burn it all into your memory. You were naive. I'll try not to make the same mistake again. Benno wasn't wrong. I should have either written the contract down or memorized it. It was entirely true that all the talk of the magic punishing those who break the contracts made me let my guard down. You followed up on it, so I'll pay for your stuff. That's what you agreed to do anyway. Wouldn't not paying be a breach of contract? I pursed my lips, pouting, and Benno looked down at me with a gleeful smile of victory. It'd only be for a breach of contract if I refused to pay. You not following up is your own problem. Now that you've followed up, I'll pay. It won't be a breach of contract if I do. Be sure to remember all of this if you want to be a merchant one day. Ugh. Benno's lips curved into a broader grin as I groaned with frustration and said, "If you hadn't noticed after reading all that about contracts, I would have wrung you dry," with a laugh. I understood that he was trying to help me grow as a merchant to the point of giving me hints to help me along in the right direction, but it was still frustrating. As I looked over the boards once more, intent on not letting him deceive me again, Benno paused his work and spoke to me. "Ah, right, could you start your winter handiwork a little early?" My family's already finished preparing for winter this year, so we could, but why? Our winter preparations were swung every which way by my dad's work circumstances. Every soldier at the gate needed time off to prepare for winter, but not everyone could leave work at once, so they took days off in shifts. Last year, his shift came fairly late, so we were preparing right up until the blizzards were hitting. But this year, his came early, and we managed to finish fairly soon. Could you make somewhere around 10 to 20 hairpins of varying colors soon? The guildmaster brags so much about his granddaughter's hairpin that I've got a lot of people asking me about them, and some of those people I can't refuse either. Won't that ruin the special feeling for Frida of being the only one with a flower hairpin during the winter baptism ceremony? I didn't know if it was smart to ruin the reason we had for overcharging them, and judging by Benno's shifting eyes, he didn't know either. Her hairpin will be the only one made to match her outfit. Store-bought ones are completely different. In that case, I think I'll charge you extra for them given the change in schedule. I smiled while requesting a higher commission fee, leaving Benno at a loss for words. When you get the chance to earn money, take it and profit as much as you possibly can, right? I'm learning from your example so I can be a fine merchant one day. I laughed to myself and Benno frowned bitterly. 10 middle coppers per hairpin. You can't complain about twice the pay, right? That won't do. Choose 11 middle coppers or 13. Splitting the money won't work out smoothly otherwise, considering the different work Lutz and I are doing. We had already told our families 2 coppers for the flower part and 1 for the pin part. Lutz and I were splitting the difference, and having an odd number of middle coppers left over would be a real pain. Fine, 11 middle coppers, you dirty merchant. I am positively delighted to receive such lavish praise from one of your esteem. Seriously, where are you learning all these words? Said Benno, looking equally parts exasperated and amused. I shrugged. Oh, could I have the pay for one of the hairpins now? I could take them out of my savings for early pay. That won't be a problem, but why? I need to cast a spell on my family to make them work fast. I would need Mom and Thule's help to finish 10 hairpins before snowfall, and if I wanted their help, I needed to motivate them. My mom in particular had done winter handiwork for most of her life, and thus would know very well just how ridiculously high the pay for those hairpins was. Which meant that she would probably feel suspicious about whether or not I was being tricked, that we would make them and not get paid. If I could show her that I was getting paid for each hairpin properly, both her motivation and trust would shoot up at the same time. Suddenly a knock came in the door. "We have returned, sir. The ordered firewood would arrive today before the store closes. We'll have it carried to your storage building by tomorrow." "By tomorrow, mind. Thank you very much. Goodbye, and be careful about the cold." Mark saw me outside, and I saw Lutz standing there with his mostly empty basket. They had dropped the tromba wood off in our building, all on the way to the lumber yard. That explained why they elected not to bring me with them. The 2 of us slowly walked home between buildings, the sky darkening faster than usual, thanks to the season. I really wanted to rush home since it was so cold, but if I moved around like that, I would definitely collapse with a fever in no time. We trudged home, and along the way I talked to Lutz about our winter handiwork need to be done early. I told him that Benno promised to pay immediately, and that we could get to work as soon as I got my family's help. Lutz nodded once, then lowered his eyebrows worried. I could make all those pins on my own without my family's help. I'm more worried about the tromba wood. The tromba wood? Why? I tilted my head in confusion. Lutz slumped over and let out a heavy sigh. "Hey, mine, you think you'll get to go to the forest to help me now that your family's told you to stop? I'm gonna have to make it all myself, aren't I? I was planning to work in the storage building this time so we can make it together. I'm not sure what my family will say about me going outside for a whole bell, though." I didn't think it'd be too hard to get outside if I told them I was going to Benno's store and that I wouldn't be leaving the city. But the longer I was outside, the more likely it was I would catch a cold and get a fever, which was a problem. The storage building? Don't we need the river? Lutz opened his eyes wide in surprise, but it was clear as day that Lutz wouldn't be able to carry the pot, steamer, and firewood to the forest. It was more efficient to work in the forest before, since we had to get our materials and firewood there, but now we have everything in the storage building. There's no reason to work in the forest, and carrying everything there will be too hard anyway. Ah, right, I would have had to carry everything. Lutz had been so worried about working alone that he had forgotten to consider just how much stuff he would need to carry. We won't have the river to dunk the steamed tromba wood, but that was all just to make the bark easier to peel by exposing it to cold water after getting steamed. Right now, the well water will do just fine. We'll have to get fresh water from the well several times to keep it from warming up, but that's better than going to the forest, right? Despite all I said, Lutz's expression was still dark with worry. Yeah, it'll be easier, but what about after that? Just storing the white bark, right? I'd like to store it after peeling it down to the white bark, but it's not like black bark can't be stored too, so it'll be fine. It might be more annoying to peel the black bark, but going into the river in this season would be suicide, so let's not even think about it. With all his worries gone, Lutz's expression brightened again. Wow, what a relief. He said to himself repeatedly, walking a bit faster than before. I'll ask Mom and Thule for help once I get home, then I'll work on steaming the wood tomorrow. I walked on while thinking about my plans for tomorrow, but my thoughts started to drift, maybe because I was hungry. We have a steamer, so I kind of want to eat a hot sweet potato with melted butter on it. I don't know if there are literal sweet potatoes in this world, but there are things similar to potatoes. If I bring potatoes tomorrow and let's bring butter, I guess we can eat buttered potatoes tomorrow. That sounds nice. Both my body and heart agree. Okay, let's do it. We arrived at the well by our houses in no time, so I drifted off in sweet fantasies. Let's stop and turn around. Mine, I'll come get you after the wood's delivered, and I'll grab the key. Just wait at home until I drop by. Don't forget to bring butter tomorrow, okay? I gave him a big wave goodbye and rushed into my building. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear Lutz shouting in shock from outside the windows. Huh? What? Butter? Why butter? What for? Wait, did I not tell him about it? Whoops, whoops. How far have I gotten? I'll keep going. I went ahead and made some. Dad went to bed right after supper since he had been on morning shift. Quietly doing handiwork at the dinner table was the perfect way to kill time until our own bedtimes without disturbing his sleep. Once he was in the bedroom, I talked to Thule and Mom about the handiwork. Frida's hair ornament is so popular that a lot of people are asking where they can buy them, so Benno asked me if I could start my winter handiwork early. He wants a lot of hairpins just like the one we made Thule. But honey... Mom and Thule glanced at each other and looked at me with doubtful expressions. It was clear that while they could help, they didn't want to do extra work in an already busy time. That was about what I expected, so I took out 2 middle coppers from my tote bag as proof and clinked them on the table. I asked to be paid ahead on the first one. Benno will pay this much per flower part. Mom and Thule stood up immediately with a clatter and pulled the table closer to the hearth for the extra light, little though it was, without a word. Wait, what? I was listening alone in my chair, stunned. Before I could even start to recover, Thule took 3 pairs of thin sewing needles from the sewing box, and Mom brought the thread-packed basket out of the storage room. I climbed off the chair, overwhelmed at their perfect coordination. As I weakly pulled my chair over to the table, Mom spoke to me. Mine, where's the finished one we can use as an example? I gave it back to Thule already, I said, leading Thule to quickly take her hairpin out of her own box. The noise she made rustling through her box made Dad call out asking what was going on. Mom just said it was nothing, and have a good night, dear. After getting my chair to the table, I climbed up onto it and saw that they had already finished preparing everything. Mine, what color should we make? Asked Mama, rustling through the basket of thread, but the specific colors didn't matter. All we had to do was make hair ornaments with the same design as Thule's. We don't know the hair colors and favorite colors of our individual customers, so he just wants us to make several of a bunch of different colors. You can just pick 3 different colors like Thule's hairpin and make as many flowers as hers has. Makes sense. How about white, yellow, and red? Seems nice and cute to me. As soon as I gave my approval, Mom began knitting at a furiously high pace. She knew how to make hair ornaments from prior experience, and thus had nothing holding her back. A small flower that would take me about 15 minutes to sew only took her 5 minutes. The more colors to pick from, the better. I think I'm going to go with white, yellow, and blue. The same colors as my own hairpin has. What colors will you pick, Mine? Giggled Thule while picking out her favorites from the basket filled with a rainbow of colors. It seems she really liked the hair ornament I made for her, which made me happy. I think I'll go with pink, red, and green. Green flowers kind of look like normal plants, which is super cute, right? Really cute, but... Hey, Mine, how do you make these? Tuli, seemingly not wanting to interrupt Mom's inner focus, scooted her chair next to mine. Since I had made Tuli's hairpin as a gift for her, she had no experience making the same kind of flowers. It's not that hard. You just do this and this. I showed Tuli how to make the small flowers while I sewed them. They were much easier to sew than Frida's roses, so Tuli mastered the technique in no time. Okay, thanks. Tuli scooted her chair back to its original position and began quietly sewing. We kept working for a while. After finishing my third flower, I glanced up and saw an overwhelming difference between how many I had made and how many more were on the table. Mom had already finished enough small flowers to make an entire ornament, and Tuli had 6 small flowers in front of her. Wowee! Here's 2 sewing beauties for you. Both Mom and Tuli were sewing so much faster than me, it was laughable. They were finishing flowers in the blink of an eye. Not even my history making weird arts and crafts helped me compared to their speed and the beauty of their flowers. I returned to work, resolving to take my time so that at the very least my hairpins wouldn't look noticeably worse than theirs when compared. Winter handiwork was something you normally did to pass the boring time you had way too much of when you were stuck inside over the winter, which meant it usually involved a lot of casual chatter, but right now we were crowded around a dark table late at night, working purely for profit. Few words were exchanged, and we were all focused entirely on our work. All done. What now? Tuli's head shot up, her expression gleaming with joy. In front of her were 12 flowers, 4 of each color. Plenty for a nice bouquet. You're fast, Tuli. I'm impressed. Now we just sew them to scraps of cloth and... Cloud, I forgot to include those in the budget. For handiwork like this, it's standard for families to buy their own materials, so we can just use what we already have, said Mom, having already started to sew her flowers onto a scrap of cloth to complete the hairpin. I'll either ask Benno to pay or ask him for cloth. You don't need to go that far. He's already paying us 2 entire middle coppers each. Just how bad is the pay Mom usually gets for this stuff? As I decided to ask Benno to calculate our budget with the cloth in mind before we started for real, Tuli went to the storage room and grabbed a piece of cloth. Just follow Mom's example and sew the flowers onto the cloth, making sure not to bundle up too many of the same color in one place. If you sew the flowers on the cloth beneath them so the cloth beneath them is blocked from view, it'll look like a bouquet of small flowers. Got it. Once Tuli finished the hairpin she had started, we called it a night. In the end, I only managed to finish half of one myself, but Tuli finished one, and Mom finished 80% of her second one. Okay, here's your pay! Yay! I gave each of them 2 middle coppers and placed their finished hairpins in my box. Now then, girls, run along to bed. I'll join you once I finish what I started. Mom pointed at the 80% finished hairpin and gave a troubled smile. That wouldn't take long at all given how fast she worked. Tuli and I tiptoed into the bedroom, making sure not to wake Dad. So why were there 2 finished hairpins on the table when I woke up? Did you stay up late, Mom? Tuli's mad and she wanted to keep working too. No fair, Mom. How come only you got to work late? Sorry, dear. I'll be more careful next time. Now, you'll be late for work. Mom apologized to Tuli, who was puffing out her cheeks, and encouraged her on to work. I'll make lots of them. Tuli shot back. I'll make lots of them when I get home. And dashed outside. After seeing her go, I picked up Mom's 2 hairpins and placed 4 middle coppers on the table in their place. I'll pay you now before you go to work, Mom, so I don't forget to later. Also, I'm going to Benno's today. If I don't completely finish the ornament with Lutz's pins and get paid for them, I won't be able to pay you 2 for the next hairpins. Okay, be careful, dear, and say hello to Benno for me. As Mom put the middle coppers into her bag, her smile told me that she planned to work just as hard tonight. The door shut, and I heard the sound of a turning key. I kept waving at the smile until I couldn't hear footsteps anymore, then sighed. This isn't good. The power of money is simply too strong. I didn't expect him to speed up this much. I especially didn't expect Mom to stay up so late. If I don't sell the finished hairpins and stock up on cash now, I'll probably run out of coins by tonight. Well, peeling the trombo wood comes first today. I didn't know when exactly Lutz would be coming, so I needed to get ready and wait. First, the almost potatoes known as potato fulls. Similar names, I know. Next, my slate pen, slate, and calculator so we can study while the wood gets steamed. Can't forget the supply order set since I'm planning to go to Benno's. Might as well grab my needles and thread to finish my half-done hairpin, which means bringing a scrap of cloth and my 7 small flowers. Plus other needles and thread to attach them to the pins and cloth. Once everything was ready, I started sewing little flowers while waiting for Lutz to arrive. After finishing about 2 of them, I heard a knock on the door and Lutz asking if I was home. Morning, Lutz. So, about the pins, have you finished any? Yeah, I got 5. What about them? Bring them all with you. I'm bringing my needles and thread, because I need to finish the hairpins while the water's boiling so I can sell them to Benno. We already finished 4 of them last night. which made Lutz's eyes shoot up. Wait, what? That's way too fast. Didn't you say making those flowers was real hard and took a lot of time? Well, not even I thought they'd work this fast. I'm honestly kind of panicking here. Alright, you just need me to get the pins, right? Anything else? Yes, there was one thing I couldn't let Lutz forget today under any circumstances. What about the butter? Did you get some ready? I thought I just misheard you. I'll go get some. Lock the door and I'll meet you downstairs. It seemed that he hadn't brought butter with him. That was close. I nearly missed out on eating the ideal potato. I saw Lutz off as he climbed down the stairs, then got my stuff and went outside. So cold. Our storage building was frosty cold, so much so that being outside felt warmer thanks to the sunlight. There was no place to start a fire inside the building, so we made plans to boil the tromba wood in front of it instead. We deposited our stuff inside the building and went outside. Lutz stacked rocks next to each other to prepare a spot for the pot, and I lined up the tromba wood in the steamer. It got filled up in no time. I think we'll need another layer for the steamer. 1 second. In the past, we didn't have to steam too much wood at once, but this time we had to steam all the materials we had immediately. We had prepared ahead of time to steam 2 layers at once, so let's get the other steamer out of the storage building. Should I go ahead and put this pot on the stones? I'll be done lining up the wood soon. I finished putting the tromba wood in the steamers while Lutz locked the pot in place. I then used a knife to carve crosses into the potatoes I brought so they could cook better and place them onto the steamers as well before putting the tops on. 20 minutes of steaming later, and we would have delicious buttered potatoes ready. Well, delicious buttered potatofuls, that is. I started sowing flowers while the fire licked the pot from below. It took me about 15 minutes to make each flower, so considering how long cleaning up would take, it was the perfect way to kill time while waiting for the potatoes. You should make some strips out of the bamboo still in the storage building. Make their tips pointy. Huh? Why? What do you mean, why? So we can make sure the buttered potatoes are ready. Huh? Mine, what are you doing? I was thinking I should go ahead and cook them if we're going to be using the steamers anyway. Do you not want any? Of course I want some. Those buttered whatevers are food, right? I see. For some reason, buttered potatoes didn't get translated. I figured the same idea would exist here since this world has sautéed potatofuls with butter. The moment Lutz realized food was in the steamers, he got to work making pointy bamboo sticks. Hey, mine, are these buttered whatevers good? I like them a lot. Honestly, you've probably had something just like them before already. It took longer than expected for the water in the pot to start boiling, likely due to its size, so it wasn't until I finished 2 flowers that enough time seemed to have passed. It was about time to check on the potatoes. Okay, let's open the lid. I waited for Lutz to open the lid, standing on one of Ralph's failed products for extra height, with a stick in my right hand and a pair of chopsticks in my left. Mind, don't put your face over it. The moment Lutz took off the lid, white steam burst out into the sky. Once the hot steam faded, I opened my eyes and saw yellow steaming potatoes next to the tromba wood. I stabbed one with my stick. It slid right in without the potato falling apart, which was a good sign. I swapped the stick for my chopsticks and readied them. Lutz, I need a plate. You think I have one? One of the flat boards will do. Also get the butter ready. You should have done all of this instead of making flowers. Get your priorities straight. You're completely right. I picked up the potatoes with chopsticks, put them on the board, and immediately had Lutz put the cover back on. I then jumped off the stand, wrenched open the cross cuts with my knife, and got some butter in there as soon as possible. The smell of melting butter was absolutely heavenly. My hype was building, but Lutz slipped over the second he saw the potatoes coming out of the steamer. What? They're just potatofuls. I thought this was going to be some awesome new recipe, mine. He was disappointed, probably due to having eaten so many of them before. They were grown in bulk around this area, so potatofuls ended up on many a dinner plate. It was hard not to get tired of them. I could understand his disappointment considering they still had their skin on them and weren't even prepared with a meal. I know there's a lot of recipes around here that involve eating potatofuls with butter. You don't have to eat them if you don't want to. I'll have some. I ignored Lutz's pouting and peeled off the skin of just the top of a potato before wrapping it in my apron so I could hold it without getting burned. I then held up the still steaming potatoes and took a big bite. The outside part alone was fairly cool thanks to the cold air, but the inside was hot and fell apart in my mouth. It had a smoky scent due to being steamed alongside tromba wood, which gave an accent to the butter and flavored the potato in a way I had never tasted at home. I put my hand on my cheek and wiggled with glee over the flavor as Lutz sighed out white breath nearby and took a bite from his. Immediately his eyes shot open and he stared at his potato. He looked between me and the potato, stunned, then took another confused bite. So good! Why? This tastes totally different from the cooked potatoes I've had at home. Because they're steamed! Yours are probably just boiled. Yeah, it's because I steamed them. Steaming potatoes packs them full of nutrition and flavor. Since I steamed them with the Tubebuddy, it's almost like I smoked them, which adds a lot of extra fancy flavor. While we ate the hot and tasty potato folds, I told Lutz about how I had made hairpins of Mom and Tuli last night. I'm not kidding either. Mom and Tuli were both sewing so fast I couldn't believe it. It sounds like they were going to work just as hard tonight too. I didn't even finish a single one. Yet another reminder of how useless I am. Don't sweat it too much, it's just sewing. What about you, Lutz? How did last night go for you? Lutz regretfully licked his fingers after eating the last of his potato fold and shook his head. Nobody cared about what I was doing. They all blew me off when I asked for help. Okay, want me to cast a magic spell on your family too? Magic? Uh-huh. We could stop by your place after Benno pays us. I'll show you then. We were done eating, so Lutz drew water from the well for us so we could drink with our hands. I then went to get the calculator, which I placed in front of Lutz. Okay, we finished 4 hairpins today. I had Benno pay us ahead of time for one, so we're getting paid for 3 today, and each is worth 11 middle coppers. So how much is he going to pay us? Lutz thought about the question seriously and then began moving his fingers across the calculator. 33 coppers. That's right. Good job. Okay, so you need to make 20 pins today. Or 20 pins total. You made 5 yesterday. How many more do you need to make? 15. Lutz looked troubled. As one might expect, he still wasn't fast at doing math involving multiple digits, even with a calculator at hand. Since he couldn't reflexively do one-digit mental math, he had to tediously go through every step on the calculator. So for now, I put aside the calculator and instead wrote some basic addition problems on his slate. You should learn this stuff first. It's important that you memorize these basic problems so that you can answer them immediately. As Lutz mumbled to himself, memorizing the questions, I got back to work finishing my hairpin. By the time I did, noon had passed and the Tubebuddy was all nicely steamed. Let's get more water and take a step back. I used my sticks to drop the Tubebuddy into the bucket of water piece by piece. Once cooled, Lutz took them out and placed them on a nearby board. The water wasn't flowing like in the river, so the bucket water quickly got pretty warm. The water's warm now. 1 sec. Lutz drew fresh water from the well, so I sat down and peeled off the black bark while waiting. Once we had new water, we added more Tubebuddy. And as the cycle repeated, after all the wood was out of the steamers, I hurriedly peeled off the black bark before it cooled down entirely. Well, let's clean up the pot and steamers. Our work for today will be finished after we put the bark on nails to dry inside the storage building. And done. Alright, same here. My fingers were still tingly from handling the hot bark. So much so that the cold air felt pretty nice. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with it. Huh? I wasn't feeling depressed. I wasn't feeling uneasy about anything. All I felt was the relief of finishing a good day's work, and yet the devouring heat within my body was going on a rampage. I reflexively tensed up to try and contain the heat within me. Whoa, mine? Lutz, seeing me freeze up, hurriedly shook my shoulders. I wanted to say, don't shake me, it's hard to concentrate, but I was clenching my teeth too hard to say anything. I reached out with my right hand to grab Lutz, and he immediately clasped it with both his hands. What's going on? You got a fever out of nowhere. Mine, are you alright? Can you hear me? I focused on the pressure from his tight grip and held back the waves of heat. I had normally contained it by imagining throwing a net around it and sucking it inside, but now it was like it was shooting tiny daggers of heat out to cut through the net. Get back inside already! Out of every heat attack I had ever experienced, it took longer to push the heat back this time than any time before.